In the parking garage, silence descended like a shroud. Michael Reed's trained eyes caught the flicker of a red laser dot dancing across a concrete pillar. A muffled thump followed gunfire with a silencer. Without hesitation, he lunged forward, one hand clamping over Olivia Warren's red-painted lips, dragging her behind a concrete column. "Don't talk," his breath warm against her ear as his eyes scanned the shadows. A bullet shattered the glass inches away, fragments cascading like deadly ice. Across the garage, a shadow paused, holding what Michael instantly recognized as a parabolic microphone. Olivia's pulse hammered beneath his palm, her voice trapped by his warning grip. That single command, "don't talk," carried the weight of unspoken terror and urgent warning that would save her life. Michael Reed knew the weight of silence. At 36, he'd learned it in desert outposts where the wrong word could trigger an ambush or reveal a position to waiting enemies. He'd perfected the art of stillness when his life depended on becoming invisible to hostile eyes. And now he taught it to his 7-year-old daughter, Sophie, in their cramped apartment above the bodega on 8th Street. Every morning at 5:45, he'd kiss her sleeping forehead before heading to Greystone Tower, where he pushed mops across marble floors that cost more than his yearly salary. His calloused hands, once steady on military intelligence equipment, now gripped industrial cleaning supplies. But those same hands could still assemble a radio from spare parts or spot surveillance equipment from 50 feet away. Sophie was his universe. Her mother had vanished when she was 2, leaving nothing but a hastily scrawled note about not being ready for motherhood. Michael had rebuilt their life piece by piece, teaching Sophie to tie her shoes with military precision, but also to paint sunflowers with wild abandon. Their refrigerator door served as her art gallery, covered in crayon drawings of the two of them holding hands beneath rainbow skies. She'd inherited his dark hair and serious eyes, but when she smiled, which was often, the whole room seemed to brighten. At Riverside Elementary, her teachers praised her kindness, though they worried about the patches on her backpack and the fact that she packed her own lunch every day. Michael worked overtime to provide, but a single father's maintenance salary only stretched so far. 20 floors above Michael's supply closet, Olivia Warren commanded an empire. At 34, she ruled Greystone Industries with a ruthless efficiency her father Richard had instilled in her since childhood. Her platinum blonde hair was always pulled into a severe chignon, her navy blue dresses tailored to perfection, her heels clicking authority across boardroom floors. Beauty was her armor, intelligence, her weapon. She'd graduated summa cum laude from Harvard Business School, taken over 3 failing subsidiaries, and turned them into profit machines within 18 months. The business press called her the Ice Queen, and she wore the title like a crown. But crowns were heavy. Every morning, Olivia stared at her reflection in her penthouse bathroom mirror, seeing her mother's eyes looking back, the mother who died when Olivia was 12, leaving her alone with a father who showed love through stock options and performance reviews. Richard Warren had built his daughter into a fortress, teaching her that vulnerability was weakness, that trust was a luxury she couldn't afford. She'd had lovers' brief affairs with men who wanted her money or her body or her influence, but never her heart. That organ, she'd learned, was better kept locked away. The contrast between their worlds couldn't have been starker. While Michael heated leftover spaghetti on a hot plate for Sophie's dinner, Olivia attended $500 per plate charity galas. While he read Sophie's secondhand library books about brave princesses, Olivia signed contracts worth millions without blinking. While he worried about making rent, she worried about hostile takeovers. They existed in the same building, but different universes connected only by the elevator cables that carried her past his floor every day. Neither knew the other existed beyond a peripheral awareness. She was the woman in Navy who never made eye contact. He was the maintenance worker who kept the building running while the powerful slept. The rhythm of their separate lives might have continued indefinitely. 2 parallel lines never meant to intersect, but Greystone Industries harbored secrets darker than its tinted windows, and one man had grown tired of waiting in the shadows. The quarterly board meeting had stretched past 11 that night, October rain lashing against the conference room windows. Olivia gathered her files, dismissing her assistant with a wave. Her bodyguard Marcus waited by the elevator, a former Navy SEAL who'd protected her for 3 years without incident. They descended to the parking garage in silence, her mind already on tomorrow's merger proposal. The garage lights flickered. Maintenance had been reporting electrical issues for weeks, but she'd been too busy to approve the repair budget. Marcus walked ahead, scanning the shadows between the concrete pillars. Olivia's Louboutins echoed in the vast space, her navy dress a dark silhouette in the gray expanse. She was reaching for her phone when Marcus suddenly stiffened his hand, moving to his concealed weapon. A whisper of movement barely visible. Then the soft pneumatic hiss of a silenced gunshot, and Marcus crumpled, clutching his shoulder. As he fell, something tumbled from his jacket, a USB drive that skittered across the concrete, stopping near a drainage grate. The label caught the fluorescent light, internal audit Q3. That's when Michael appeared, moving with the fluid grace of a predator. He'd been checking the garage's ventilation system, a routine task that had saved Olivia's life. His trained eyes swept the garage with methodical precision. Two more shadows shifted near the exit ramp. His fingers found Olivia's wrist, tapping 3 times military code for "stay down." She trembled against the concrete, her designer dress collecting oil stains, but she understood the primal message: obey or die. Michael slipped toward Marcus's prone form, checking for a pulse while palming the USB drive. The bodyguard was breathing, but unconscious blood spreading beneath his shoulder. Michael produced a Ziploc bag from his maintenance cart. He always carried them for chemical spills, and sealed the USB inside. His mind raced through protocols from a different life, when securing intelligence meant the difference between coming home or coming home in a box. The shooters were professionals. They'd wait for their target to move to panic. But Michael had learned patience in places where sandstorms could last for days. He pulled out his phone not to call 911. The shooters would monitor emergency frequencies, but to activate a program he'd written years ago, one that cloned data while leaving the original untouched. The USB's contents flooded his screen: spreadsheets, emails, video files. Names jumped out: board members, city officials, offshore accounts. At the center of it all, one name appeared repeatedly: Bennett Hayes, Greystone Industries Chief Operations Officer. Michael had seen him once, a gaunt figure in a charcoal suit who'd complained about water spots on his office window. The man's appearance had unsettled Michael even then. Pale skin stretched over sharp cheekbones, blonde hair slicked back with expensive pomade, gray eyes that seemed to catalog everyone's weaknesses. The shooters were moving now, coordinating through earpieces. Michael recognized the pattern: military contractors, probably ex-special forces turned mercenary. They'd chosen their positions, well covering all exits, but they'd made one mistake. They'd assumed their targets would run. Michael had different plans. He pulled Olivia deeper into the mechanical room behind the parking level, where massive pipes and electrical panels created a maze of hiding spots. Her breathing was rapid, panicked. He pressed his finger to her lips again, feeling her lipstick smear against his skin. She nodded, understanding that even a whisper could betray them through the concrete acoustics. The next 2 hours became a deadly game of cat and mouse. Michael used his knowledge of the building's infrastructure to create distractions, triggering car alarms through the electrical system, reversing ventilation fans to create noise and confusion. When the shooters finally retreated, sirens approaching in the distance, he knew this was just the beginning. The USB in his pocket felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Whatever Bennett Hayes was planning, it was worth killing for. Dawn was breaking when Michael finally got Olivia to a secure location, not the police station, which could be compromised, but an old safe house from his military days. She sat on a metal folding chair, her perfect navy dress torn, her immaculate chignon now disheveled. For the first time in years, Olivia Warren looked human, vulnerable, afraid. Michael connected the USB to a secure laptop, one disconnected from any network. The files revealed a staggering conspiracy. Bennett Hayes had been systematically embezzling funds, bribing officials, and setting up shell companies to funnel money offshore. But the most disturbing discovery was a series of medical reports on Richard Warren showing elevated levels of arsenic in his bloodstream, not enough to kill, but enough to mimic symptoms of cognitive decline. Olivia's hands trembled as she scrolled through the evidence. "I've been watching my father deteriorate for months. The doctor said early onset dementia, but it was poison all along." Bennett Hayes stood at his office window, watching the sun rise over the city. His diamond watch caught the light, an $18,000 reminder of how far he'd climbed from the foster homes of his youth. At 40, he'd orchestrated hostile takeovers that had destroyed entire companies, crushed competitors with the dispassion of someone stepping on insects. His reflection in the glass showed what he'd cultivated: a predator in a $10,000 suit. his pale features arranged in an expression of permanent calculation. The call came at 7:15. His mercenaries had failed. The USB was missing, and Marcus the bodyguard was in intensive care, unable to speak. Bennett's fingers tightened on his phone until his knuckles went white. 20 years of planning, 2 decades of positioning himself as Richard Warren's most trusted advisor, and now some maintenance worker threatened everything. The USB contained enough evidence to destroy him, but more importantly, it revealed the final phase of his plan, forcing Richard Warren to sign over control of the company through a combination of blackmail and fabricated evidence of insider trading. Richard was weak sentimental since his wife's death, easy to manipulate through his devotion to his daughter. Bennett had counted on that weakness, had nurtured it, feeding Richard's paranoia about competitors while positioning himself as the only one who could protect Olivia's inheritance. But now the maintenance man had the evidence, and worse, he had Olivia. Bennett activated his network dirty cops, private investigators, cyber specialists who could track anyone through their digital footprint. Michael Reed would surface eventually. He had a daughter, according to his file, 7 years old, Sophie. Bennett smiled, a cold expression that never reached his eyes. Everyone had pressure points. Michael paced the safe house, his military training kicking in. First, secure the principal, Olivia, then secure the intelligence, the USB. Finally, develop an exit strategy. But this wasn't a war zone. This was home, and Sophie was still out there. Olivia sat with the laptop, her face ashen. These quarterly vitamin injections. My father's personal physician has been poisoning him for months. Dr. Lawson? Bennett's college roommate. Michael's jaw tightened. I've done 5 years in places where I couldn't trust anyone. Places where the wrong word could get you killed. Places where I had to spot a lie before the liar finished speaking. I spent that time watching for people like Bennett Hayes, men who wear expensive suits but have the eyes of killers. Olivia bristled, her armor briefly reassembling. You're a janitor. What could you possibly know about men like Bennett Hayes? I know he's willing to kill for whatever he wants. I know he's been planning this for years, and I know he won't stop until he gets what he came for. I'm not just a janitor, Ms. Warren. Before this, I was intelligence, special operations, the kind they don't put on recruitment posters. Her expression shifted, reassessing him. You're not what you seem. Neither are you. I've watched you walk through that lobby for 2 years. Ice Queen, they call you. But I saw your face when you found out your father was being poisoned. That wasn't ice. That was fire. Their eyes locked across the room, an unexpected moment of recognition between two people from different worlds. The moment shattered when Michael's phone buzzed. His contact at the school, Sophie, was safe for now. But Michael knew it wouldn't last. Bennett would find her, use her to get to him. We need to move. Now. They'll be tracking us. Olivia struggled to her feet, wincing as her designer heels pinched feet not used to running for their lives. I need different clothes. And shoes. I can't function like this. Michael tossed her a backpack containing jeans, a sweatshirt, and sneakers, emergency supplies he kept at the safe house. He turned away while she changed studying maps on his phone. They'd need transportation untraceable. Money. Weapons. Olivia emerged from the bathroom looking like a different person. The CEO armor stripped away, replaced by civilian clothing that hung loose on her slender frame. Without makeup, with her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, she looked younger, more human. Michael Reed never thought he'd need to use his training again, not after leaving the service. He'd sought normalcy, predictability, the opposite of his military life. Maintenance work provided that. Regular hours, no one shooting at him, time to raise Sophie properly. But the skills remained dormant but not forgotten. The hypervigilance, the tactical awareness, the ability to become invisible in plain sight. The first attempt came at Sophie's school. Michael spotted the surveillance van immediately, wrong plates for the neighborhood, antenna configuration that screamed intelligence gathering. He'd been picking Sophie up personally since the garage incident had taught her new games about seeing who could spot the most details on their walks home. She thought it was fun not knowing her father was teaching her counter-surveillance techniques used by embassy personnel in hostile territories. He hustled Sophie into their apartment, packed a small bag with her favorite stuffed rabbit and some clothes. Sweetheart, remember our special game, the one where we pretend to be spies? We're going to play it for real now. You're going to stay with Uncle Danny for a while. Sophie's eyes widened with excitement rather than fear. She'd met Uncle Danny, Daniel Carter Michaels, former unit commander, who now worked for the FBI's Organized Crime Division, several times before. Uncle Danny has a dog. Yes, he does. And you're going to take very good care of both of them while I'm away. But remember our most important rule. Don't talk about the game to anyone but you and Uncle Danny. Sophie nodded solemnly, understanding in her 7-year-old way that this was serious. Michael called Daniel from a burner phone. Need extraction for the package. High priority. Daniel understood immediately. The old safe house. 1 hour. The exchange happened in a crowded shopping mall food court. Sophie, thinking it all a game, happily went with Daniel clutching her stuffed rabbit. Michael watched them disappear into the crowd, his heart constricting. The hardest part of his job had always been walking away from those he loved, never knowing if he'd see them again. The second attempt was more sophisticated. Mercenaries posing as utility workers approached Michael and Olivia's safe house. Michael watched from the cafe across the street, having installed cameras weeks ago as part of his standard security protocols. They never found the safe house empty. Michael had been one step ahead, already relocating Olivia to a motel outside the city. Olivia discovered what it meant to be hunted. Stripped of her corporate armor, her penthouse fortress, she found herself dependent on a man she would have passed in the hallway without acknowledgement just days before. Michael had placed her in a modest motel outside the city, paid cash registered under a false name. She sat on the polyester bedspread, her platinum hair hidden under a baseball cap he'd bought at a gas station, and tried to process how completely her life had imploded. The evidence on the USB was damning but complex. Shell companies layered upon shell companies, bribes disguised as consulting fees, a web of corruption that implicated half the board of directors. But at its center was something worse, evidence that Bennett Hayes had been systematically poisoning Richard Warren microdoses of arsenic that mimicked the symptoms of age-related cognitive decline. The quarterly vitamin shots Richard received from his private physician Bennett's college roommate were actually destroying his mind from within. Michael and Olivia met at a diner off Interstate 95 to compare notes. She looked different in jeans and a plain sweater, younger, more human. They sat in a corner booth speaking in low voices while truck drivers consumed coffee and eggs around them. We have to go to the FBI. Michael's hands wrapped around a mug of black coffee, his eyes constantly scanning the diner for threats. Olivia shook her head, her voice bitter with experience. You don't understand. Bennett has connections everywhere. Judges, prosecutors, federal agents. The moment we surface, we're dead. Then we release it to the press with wet proof that it's real. Bennett will spin it as corporate sabotage, a deep fake, a competitor's attack. He owns 3 media conglomerates through shell companies. His reach is extensive. Michael studied her face, seeing past the beauty to the intelligence beneath. You're protecting your father. Her composure cracked just slightly. He's all I have left. Yes, he's cold. Yes, he pushed me. But he's still my father. And according to these files, he's been slowly murdered for 2 years. Then we save him by exposing the truth. Olivia's laugh held no humor. The truth will destroy him too. Some of these deals before Bennett's influence. My father wasn't innocent. Greystone Industries was built on stepped on backs and broken promises. The investigation will ruin everything my family built. Michael leaned back, processing. In his world, things were simpler. Protect Sophie, eliminate threats, survive. But Olivia lived in a universe of complicated loyalties where love and betrayal were separated by interpretation rather than action. My daughter drew a picture yesterday. Michael's voice softened, a rare crack in his professional demeanor. It was our family, but she added a third person, a woman with yellow hair. She said our family looked lonely with just 2 people. Olivia's eyes glistened. I haven't been part of a real family since I was 12. Then maybe it's time to choose. Your father's empire built on corruption or a chance at something real, even if it means starting over. Their argument erupted, then sharp words flying across the Formica table. She accused him of not understanding the complexities of corporate survival, the thousands of employees who'd lose their jobs if Greystone Industries collapsed. He shot back that she was enabling the very system that had created monsters like Bennett, that her silence made her complicit. They were both right, both wrong, both terrified of the precipice they stood upon. Finally, Olivia broke. Really broke. 22 years of frozen emotions melted in an instant, and she sobbed into her hands while truckers politely looked away. Michael moved to her side of the booth, awkwardly patting her shoulder. This warrior who could disarm a bomb but didn't know how to comfort a crying woman. She leaned into him, and for a moment, two strangers became something else. Two people trying to survive, something neither had asked for. The decision to run came when Bennett's men found the motel. Michael had been watching the parking lot through the scope of a rifle he'd acquired from an old contact when the black SUVs arrived. He grabbed Olivia in the go-bag he'd prepared, escaping through the bathroom window while flashbang grenades shattered the front door. They ran through the woods behind the motel. Olivia's sensible sneakers, a recent concession to their situation, still struggling with the rough ground until they reached the backup vehicle he'd hidden. Michael drove through the night, taking back roads, switching vehicles twice at prearranged locations. Olivia dozed fitfully in the passenger seat, exhaustion finally overcoming fear. Sophie was waiting at the fourth safe house guarded by Daniel Carter, who now worked for the FBI's Organized Crime Division. Daniel had questions, lots of them, but he trusted Michael enough to keep his niece safe while Michael figured out the next move. Sophie launched herself into Michael's arms the moment he walked through the door, her small body trembling with excitement rather than fear. "I've been super quiet, just like you taught me. Uncle Danny says I'm the best spy he's ever met." Michael swung her around, his heart lighter, just having her in his arms again. His eyes met Daniel's over Sophie's head, a silent question. Daniel nodded. No one had followed them. They were safe for now. Sophie noticed Olivia hovering uncertainly in the doorway. Her eyes widened with recognition. "You're the pretty lady from Daddy's work, the one in the pictures," Olivia's brow furrowed in confusion. "Pictures I sometimes take Sophie to work on weekends," Michael explained. "When the executives are gone, she likes to explore the building, and she notices everything." Sophie nodded enthusiastically. "I drew you. In your blue dress. Want to see?" Before Olivia could respond, Sophie was dragging her by the hand to the kitchen table where crayons and paper were scattered. Michael watched something tightening in his chest as his daughter chattered happily to the woman whose life he'd saved, whose world he'd upended, who now sat at a scarred kitchen table coloring with a 7-year-old as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Daniel pulled Michael aside, his expression grave. "You know what you've stepped into, right? Bennett Hayes isn't just some corporate shark. He's connected. Old money, new crimes. The kind of reach that makes people disappear." Michael's jaw set. "He's after my daughter, Dan. That makes this personal." Daniel ran a hand through his graying hair. "I can protect Sophie. But you and Ms. Warren, you need a plan, a real one, not just running. I've been analyzing the data on that USB. There's something bigger than embezzlement going on. Hayes has been systematically dismantling Greystone from within, selling off intellectual property, offshoring assets. But why? Why not just take over legitimately? Richard Warren is getting older. Hayes is the obvious successor. Maybe it's not about taking over. Maybe it's about destroying it." The mountain cabin had been Michael's grandfather's, a hunting retreat that hadn't seen visitors in 5 years. No electricity, no running water, just a wood stove and walls thick enough to withstand Vermont winters. Michael knew a storm was coming, had felt it in his bones the way his grandfather had taught him, reading the pressure change in wind patterns. It would buy them time, make the roads impassable, give them a chance to think and plan. He loaded the truck with supplies from a cash-only general store 50 miles from anywhere. Canned goods batteries, firewood blankets, children's books for Sophie, even a stuffed rabbit he'd spotted that looked like one she'd had as a baby. Olivia sat in the passenger seat, having traded her destroyed sneakers for hiking boots that didn't quite fit. She'd never been camping, never split wood or hauled water from a well. Her world had been climate-controlled, sanitized, managed by assistants, and maintained by people like Michael. Daniel would keep Sophie safe at a separate location, a decision that tore at Michael's heart, but was tactically sound. They couldn't risk Bennett finding both of them together. Sophie had cried when he'd told her they had to separate again, but she'd nodded bravely when he explained it was part of their spy game. "Uncle Danny will teach you special codes," he promised, "and when this is all over, we'll have the biggest ice cream sundae in the world." The storm hit just as they reached the cabin. Within hours, 2 feet of snow had fallen, with more coming. The temperature plummeted. Michael taught Olivia how to feed the wood stove, how to melt snow for water, how to heat cans of soup on the cast iron surface. She was a quick study, her CEO precision translated to survival tasks with surprising adaptability. They sat across from each other at the rough wooden table, eating soup heated on the wood stove, the howling wind outside creating an illusion of isolation of safety. In the flickering light of the kerosene lamp, Olivia looked softer. The sharp edges of the Ice Queen melted away. "You're not what you seem, Mr. Reed." Her voice was quiet, almost contemplative. "Neither are you, Ms. Warren." The formality felt absurd given their circumstances, sharing a remote cabin running for their lives, but it maintained a necessary distance, a reminder that this forced intimacy was temporary, circumstantial. Olivia traced the rim of her soup bowl with one finger, her nails now bare of polish, her hands showing the beginning roughness of manual labor. "I was 12 when my mother died. Car accident. Brake line failure, they said. Mechanical defect." She paused, the words heavy with decades of grief. "My father changed after that, became harder, more focused on the company, less on me, except as his heir." Michael nodded, understanding more than she knew. The military had shown him how trauma reshapes people, hardens them, or breaks them, rarely leaving them unchanged. "That's why you became what he wanted. The perfect CEO." A bitter smile touched her lips. "I excelled at everything he valued. Harvard MBA, strategic acquisitions, profit margins. I became exactly what Greystone Industries needed, what he needed, and what did Olivia need?" The question hung between them unanswered because she'd never allowed herself to ask it. Her entire identity had been built around being Richard Warren's daughter, Greystone's heir. Remove those pillars, and who remained the second night the temperature dropped to -10? The wood stove struggled to heat the drafty cabin. Michael gave his jacket to Olivia, his blanket as well, and sat up tending the fire in just a flannel shirt. Olivia watched him through half-closed eyes, this man who'd gone from stranger to protector in 72 hours. His hands were gentle when he added logs to the fire, but she'd seen those same hands disable two mercenaries in the motel parking lot. The contradiction fascinated her. "You're freezing," she whispered when the fire had died down to embers. "I'm fine. Don't be a martyr." She opened her blanket, an invitation and a challenge. He hesitated, then slid in beside her, their bodies sharing warmth while the storm raged outside. They didn't speak, didn't need to. The intimacy was more profound than any she'd experienced in her penthouse with men who'd whispered empty promises. This was survival trust, something elemental and honest. On the third day, trapped in the cabin, while the storm continued, Olivia discovered a hidden partition in the USB's file structure. Her laptop, running on battery power they couldn't spare, revealed documents that made her blood run cold. Not only was Bennett poisoning her father, but he'd orchestrated her mother's car accident 22 years ago. The brake line failure that had sent Margaret Warren's Mercedes off a cliff hadn't been mechanical failure, but murder designed to break Richard's spirit and make him pliable. Olivia stared at the screen, her world reshaping itself around this revelation. Her mother's death had defined everything, her father's coldness, her own emotional armor, the way she'd learned to survive without love. And it had all been orchestrated by a man who'd attended the funeral, who'd comforted her father, who'd slowly wormed his way into their lives like a parasite. "I'm going to kill him." Her voice was quiet, devoid of emotion. Michael took the laptop from her hands, his expression serious. "No, you're going to destroy him with the truth. Death would be mercy, prison, public humiliation, losing everything that's justice. My father might be involved." Even as she denied it, doubt crept in. Had Richard known? Had he traded his wife's life for power? The thought made her physically ill. She grabbed Michael's phone before he could stop her, typing a message to her father's private number. "Dad, I'm safe. Bennett is trying to kill me. Please help. I have evidence of Mom's murder." Michael lunged for the phone, but it was too late. The message was sent. "You just signed our death warrants. He's my father." She insisted, a final desperate attempt to cling to the one constant in her life. And Bennett doesn't control everything around him. As if to prove his point, Michael's surveillance app triggered an alert. Vehicles approaching from 3 directions, still miles away but closing fast. The storm had broken enough for them to navigate the mountain roads. They had minutes, not hours. Richard Warren received his daughter's message in his library, bourbon trembling in his hand. Beside him, his assistant of 15 years, a man Bennett had placed there, read it over his shoulder. Within seconds, Bennett knew exactly where they were. The attack came at dawn. Michael had moved them to a defensive position in the cabin's root cellar, but he knew they couldn't hold for long. 6 mercenaries, military-grade weapons, tactical coordination. He had a hunting rifle, a pistol, and a civilian to protect. The first wave came from the front. Flashbangs and smoke grenades preceded armored figures. Michael had anticipated this, had rigged the entrance with improvised explosives made from cleaning supplies and camping fuel. The explosion bought them seconds, not minutes. "Don't talk," he commanded Olivia, knowing the mercenaries would be using acoustic equipment to locate them. She pressed against the earthen wall, her breath coming in short gasps. In that moment, she wasn't a CEO or an heiress. She was just a woman fighting for her life. The second wave came through the windows. Michael engaged them with controlled bursts, his military training keeping him calm while his world exploded around him. A mercenary broke through. Michael was out of ammunition. They grappled, crashed into the wall. The man's superior armor and youth overwhelming Michael's experience. The mercenary raised his weapon for the killing shot. Olivia hit him with the cast iron pan from the stove, a savage blow that dropped him instantly. She stood over the unconscious man, breathing hard, blood splattered on her white sweater. Michael had never seen anything more beautiful than Olivia Warren choosing violence to protect them. "We can't win here." Michael gasped, his ribs aching from the fight. "But I know where we can." They fled through a tunnel Michael's grandfather had dug beneath the cabin, an old bootlegger's escape route from Prohibition days. It led to a hidden garage where an ancient pickup truck sat waiting, preserved under tarps. The mercenaries would expect them to flee on foot, would be searching the woods. The truck coughed to life, Michael's mechanical skills proving their worth yet again. They drove in silence, the gravity of their situation settling around them. Olivia's text to her father had confirmed what Michael suspected. Bennett's reach extended to Richard's inner circle. No one could be trusted. The realization carved something hollow inside Olivia, the last pillar of her identity crumbling. If not Richard Warren's daughter, the Greystone heiress, then who was she? Miles passed beneath their tires, the Vermont landscape a blur of white and green. Olivia finally broke the silence. "My father received my message, and now Bennett knows where we are. If my father isn't involved, Bennett must have someone monitoring his communications. Or your father told him directly." Michael's voice was gentle, but the words cut deep. Olivia stared out the window, her reflection ghost-like against the passing trees. "My entire life has been a lie. Everything I've worked for, everything I've sacrificed, it was all built on my mother's murder." Michael glanced at her, seeing the devastation written across her features. "Not everything. You built something of yourself, too. Something Bennett can't take away." A bitter laugh escaped her. "What's left of me, if you strip away Greystone, I'm nothing without it. I've seen nothing." Michael's voice hardened. "I've been nothing." "That's not what you are." The warehouse sat on the industrial edge of the city, a building Michael had rigged with cameras during his time preparing safe houses. Every corner, every angle were all feeding to a server that backed up to the cloud. If they were going to dot, it would be documented, evidence that even Bennett couldn't erase. They arrived just ahead of their pursuers, Sophie hidden with Daniel at a secure location. It was just Michael and Olivia now making their final stand. She'd refused to leave him, refused to run while he fought alone. They'd argued briefly and intensely before she'd simply picked up a weapon and said, "Together or not at all." The warehouse echoed with their footsteps as they took positions. Michael had chosen this battlefield carefully. Multiple levels scattered cover, emergency exits he'd mapped, but the mercenaries wouldn't know. Most importantly, the cameras that would capture everything. Bennett arrived with the second wave. Unable to resist being present for the final act, he entered the warehouse in his charcoal suit, diamond watch glinting in the industrial lighting, looking incongruous among the rust and debris. His pale face showed satisfaction as his men surrounded Michael and Olivia's position. "The USB." He called out, his voice echoing. "Give it to me, and I'll make it quick. The girl doesn't have to suffer." Michael emerged from cover, hands visible but not raised. "You mean the USB that details how you murdered Margaret Warren, how you've been poisoning Richard, how you've stolen $40 million through shell companies?" Bennett's composure cracked slightly, a twitch at the corner of his mouth. "No one will believe a maintenance man in a disgraced CEO. They'll believe video evidence." Olivia stepped out beside Michael. Every word you're saying is being recorded, transmitted, backed up where your hackers can't reach. Bennett laughed a sound like breaking glass. You think I care about recordings? I own judges, prosecutors, entire media networks. The truth is, whatever I say it is, not anymore. Michael held up his phone showing a live stream. 12,000 viewers and climbing. Amazing what goes viral these days. That's when Bennett lost control. He pulled a gun, chrome-plated decorative, the weapon of a man who paid others to kill. Then you'll die knowing you accomplished nothing. The gunfight erupted in chaos, mercenaries firing. Michael and Olivia diving for cover. Concrete chips flying like shrapnel. Michael had given Olivia a crash course in tactical movement, but she was still a civilian, still vulnerable. He tried to shield her to draw fire, but there were too many angles, too many shooters. A mercenary flanked them. Michael's weapon clicked empty. The man smiled, raising his rifle. Olivia grabbed a fire extinguisher, spraying foam in his face before swinging it like a club. The man went down and she took his weapon, her hands steady despite never having held an assault rifle before. I've had self-defense training since I was 14. Her voice was breathless, but determined. My father insisted, said the daughter of a billionaire was always a target. Michael's respect for her deepened. They fought back to back, Michael calling out positions while Olivia provided covering fire. She was magnificent, terrified, but determined, a warrior in a blood-stained sweater. They moved through the warehouse like dancers, each covering the other's weakness, wordless communication born of absolute trust. Bennett watched his mercenaries fall one by one, his pale face growing paler. The live stream viewer count had passed 50,000. Comments flooded in, people recognizing him, calling for justice. His phone rang, board members, lawyers, contacts in law enforcement, all abandoning ship. You've destroyed everything, he snarled, advancing on their position. 20 years of work. You destroyed yourself. Olivia replied, standing tall despite a graze on her shoulder. The moment you killed my mother, you signed your own warrant. Bennett raised his gun toward her. Michael moved to intercept, but he was too far away. The shot rang out, but Bennett fell, clutching his shoulder. Daniel Carter stood in the doorway, FBI tactical team spreading out behind him. Michael Reed, you magnificent bastard, Daniel called out. You always did know how to throw a party. The arrest was textbook. Bennett Hayes, screaming about his connections, his power, his influence, was dragged away in handcuffs while news helicopters circled overhead. The live stream had gone beyond viral. It was international news. The fall of Greystone Industries, the murder conspiracy, the heroic maintenance man, and the CEO who'd risked everything for justice. Richard Warren was arrested at his estate, his cognitive decline too advanced to fully understand the charges. The poisoning had done irreversible damage. He would spend his remaining years in a medical facility, his empire dismantled, his legacy reduced to a cautionary tale about power and corruption. Olivia lost everything. The board voted her out within hours. Her assets were frozen pending investigation. The penthouse, the cars, the designer wardrobe, all gone. She stood outside Greystone Tower with a single suitcase, watching workers remove her name from the building directory. Michael found her there at sunset, Sophie's small hand clutched in his. You okay? Olivia laughed, a sound with edges. I'm nobody now. No power, no money, no name that means anything except scandal. You're wrong. He took her hand, Sophie watching with wide, hopeful eyes. You're the woman who fought beside me, who protected Sophie, who chose truth over comfort. That means everything. Sophie tugged at Olivia's sleeve, offering her a crayon drawing, 3 stick figures holding hands beneath a rainbow. Our family, she announced with the certainty only a child could possess. That's us. Olivia knelt, taking the drawing with trembling hands. She looked up at Michael, something unspoken passing between them. A question, a possibility. My place isn't much, Michael said, reading her thoughts, but it's warm. And there's room. They walked away together, her heels clicking one last time on the pavement she'd once owned, Sophie skipping between them, their unlikely family forged in fire, moving toward something none of them could have imagined just days before. As they reached the corner, Sophie looked up at Olivia, her face solemn with childhood wisdom. Daddy says sometimes we have to lose everything to find what really matters. Olivia squeezed the child's hand, feeling something crack and heal simultaneously within her chest. I think your daddy might be right. Behind them, the Greystone Tower stood against the darkening sky, its windows reflecting the sunset like flames. Ahead, an uncertain future waited, but for the first time in 22 years, Olivia Warren walked toward it without armor, without a mask, without the weight of a legacy built on lies. She walked as herself, whoever that might turn out to be. Michael watched her from the corner of his eye, this woman who'd been forged in the same fire that had shaped him, loss, betrayal, survival. They were unlikely allies, unlikely friends, perhaps something more. The road ahead was uncertain, fraught with legal battles and public scrutiny, but they would face it together. I've spent my life watching for danger, he realized. I became so good at spotting threats that I forgot how to recognize opportunity when it appeared. Until now. Sophie swung between them, her small hands linking theirs, creating a circuit, a connection, a possibility. And for the first time since leaving the service, Michael Reed felt something he'd almost forgotten: hope. The mountain cabin stood isolated against the backdrop of snow-covered pines, a relic from another era when men sought solitude as a form of strength. Michael worked methodically, reinforcing the cabin's defenses, while Olivia paced the worn floorboards, her CEO precision finding no outlet in this rustic prison. The blizzard outside wasn't just weather, it was a temporary ally, buying them precious hours away from Bennett's mercenaries. Michael stacked firewood beside the ancient cast-iron stove, movement's economical mind racing through contingencies. The cabin's simplicity, one main room, a small bedroom, root cellar below, made it defensible but also vulnerable. No escape routes except the tunnel his grandfather had built, which now might be their only lifeline. Olivia stood at the frosted window, scanning the endless, white landscape. This place is completely off-grid. How did you find it? Michael tested the stove's damper, adjusting the airflow to maximize heat. My grandfather built it during the Cold War. Believed society would collapse eventually. Taught me that self-reliance isn't just a virtue, it's survival. Her breath fogged the glass as she traced invisible patterns. You're more than you appear, Mr. Reed. I've met Special Forces operators at charity galas. They wear their training like expensive watches, visible to anyone who knows what to look for. But you hide yours completely. Michael placed another log in the stove, sparks dancing upward. When I left the service, I wanted a different life for Sophie. Normal, predictable. Being invisible became a habit, not a tactic. Night descended rapidly, the temperature plummeting with the sun. The cabin's interior glowed amber from kerosene lamps, shadows dancing across rough-hewn walls. Olivia huddled near the stove, her body still adjusting to the brutal cold after years of climate-controlled environments. The radio crackled with static before Daniel's voice broke through. Michael adjusted the frequency, Sophie's excited chatter bringing the first real smile to his face in days. She described the fort she'd built with Uncle Danny's couch cushions, the secret codes they were inventing, all of it a game that shielded her from the deadly reality. When the transmission ended, silence settled heavy between them. Olivia watched Michael's face, the momentary softness hardening back into vigilance. You're a good father. You've protected her from the truth without lying to her. That's rare. Michael checked the rifle he'd positioned near the door, muscle memory, guiding his hands through the maintenance routine. My father disappeared when I was 8, just walked out one day. My mother told me he was on a special mission. I spent years believing he'd return a hero. He thumbed the firing pin, eyes distant. The mission was a waitress in Tucson. Sometimes the kinder lie is worse than the brutal truth. Olivia absorbed this, another piece of the puzzle that was Michael Reed. Beyond the cabin walls, the wind howled, nature's fury matching the storm, brewing inside them both. She pulled the borrowed sweater tighter, its rough wool a constant reminder of her displacement. The USB drive sat between them on the table, its innocuous plastic shell containing destruction and salvation in equal measure. Olivia opened her laptop, the blue glow illuminating her face in the dimness. Batteries at 30%. If we're going to find anything else, it needs to be now. Michael nodded, moving beside her as she navigated through encrypted folders. Their shoulders touched a point of warmth in the frigid cabin. On-screen, financial records scrolled past offshore accounts, shell companies' bearer bonds converted to digital assets, the skeleton of Bennett's empire built inside the bones of Greystone. Olivia's fingers flew across the keyboard, her business acumen translating the complex financial maneuvers. He's been siphoning funds for years. Small amounts from dozens of accounts routed through subsidiaries, then offshore. Classic embezzlement, but on a scale that's staggering. Michael studied the patterns military intelligence training, looking beyond the numbers. It's not just theft. This is preparation. He's building a war chest. A subfolder labeled Legacy required additional decryption. Olivia's brow furrowed as she attempted various passwords, corporate algorithms, dates significant to Greystone. Nothing worked. Her frustration mounted with each failure, fingers pressing keys with increasing force. Michael placed a hand over hers, stilling the frantic motion. What would Bennett consider his legacy? Not Greystone, not money. What drives someone to spend 20 years infiltrating a company just to destroy it? Olivia's eyes widened with sudden clarity. Revenge. She typed Margaret into the password field. The folder unlocked, revealing its devastating contents. Police reports, insurance claims, mechanical diagrams of brake systems, payments to a mechanic now deceased, and photographed surveillance images of Margaret Warren in the days before her death. Evidence meticulously gathered and preserved not as proof of innocence, but as a trophy. Olivia's hand trembled over the mousepad. He kept this, all these years, like a memento. Michael scanned the documents, professional detachment masking his disgust. The final file was a video Margaret Warren leaving her yoga class, entering her Mercedes, the same car that would plunge off a cliff hours later. The footage was grainy, taken from a distance, but it captured her smile as she waved to someone off camera. Her last day preserved by her killer. Olivia closed the laptop, unable to watch more. My entire life changed that day. Everything I am the Ice Queen, the ruthless CEO, was born when she died. And Bennett was there watching me become this person he helped create. Morning arrived with brutal clarity, sunlight reflecting off snow and blinding brilliance. Olivia stood outside the cabin, exhaling clouds of vapor that dissipated in the brittle air. Michael had insisted she learn to shoot, pressing the pistol into her reluctant hands. She held the weapon awkwardly, its weight unfamiliar, despite her previous self-defense training. I had an instructor at 14, Krav Maga 3 times a week. My father said it was because wealthy daughters were targets. Now I wonder if he suspected something about Bennett even then. Michael positioned himself behind her, adjusting her stance, his chest against her back, as he aligned her aim toward an improvised target, a can atop a fence post. Keep both eyes open. Breathe out when you squeeze the trigger. Don't anticipate the recoil. The first shot went wild, the recoil stronger than she expected. The second clipped the fence. By the fifth, she hit the can, sending it spinning into the snow. A small victory that lightened her expression momentarily. They spent the morning alternating between shooting practice and combat basics, how to break a hold vulnerable points on the human body, how to fall without injury. Olivia was a quick study, her body remembering long dormant training, adding new layers of practical knowledge to theoretical understanding. Inside, as they warmed by the stove, eating heated canned stew, Olivia flexed her sore muscles. This wasn't in my 5-year career plan. She attempted humor, but it fell flat against the gravity of their situation. Michael studied her across the table, this woman who'd adapted to their circumstances with unexpected resilience. What was in your 5-year plan? Olivia stirred the stew, avoiding his gaze. Greystone expanding into sustainable energy. Personal development, board seats at cultural institutions, perhaps political connections. The usual trajectory. Her voice softened. Maybe a child, eventually. With the right genetic match and surrogacy arrangements, of course. All perfectly scheduled and controlled. Michael's eyebrow raised slightly. Life rarely follows our schedules. Sophie wasn't planned. Her mother and I, we were young, impulsive. When she left, I thought my life was over. But Sophie, she became everything. The most unplanned thing became the most important. Olivia absorbed this, another glimpse into the complexity behind his composed exterior. This cabin smells like my grandfather's hunting lodge in Montana. We went every summer until I was 12. After that, boarding school, then college, then Greystone. I haven't smelled pine and wood smoke in 20 years. The storm returned that afternoon, wind howling through tiny gaps in the cabin's construction. Temperature plummeted further, the stove struggling against nature's assault. They huddled near the heat source, blankets wrapped around shoulders, conversation flowing easier with proximity and shared danger. Michael described desert deployments, the oppressive heat, the constant vigilance, the brotherhood forged in hostile territories. Olivia spoke of boardroom battles, corporate maneuvers, the isolation of leadership. Different battlefields, similar wounds. The battery in Olivia's laptop finally died, severing their last technological connection to the outside world. The radio remained their only communication lifeline, scheduled check-ins with Daniel, their tenuous connection to Sophie and safety. Night brought temperatures that tested the cabin's integrity. Michael fed the stove constantly, but cold seeped through every surface. Olivia's teeth chattered despite multiple layers. Even the blanket seemed inadequate against Vermont's winter fury. Michael noticed her trembling. Body heat is most efficient when shared. Survival basics. His matter-of-fact tone removed intimacy from the suggestion, making it tactical rather than personal. Olivia hesitated only briefly before moving beside him on the rough sofa they'd pulled near the stove. They arranged blankets over and around them, creating a cocoon of shared warmth. Her shivering gradually subsided as his body heat enveloped her. In the flickering light with the storm raging outside, time seemed suspended. Olivia's head eventually rested against Michael's shoulder, exhaustion overcoming propriety. My father once told me never to show weakness. That vulnerability was a luxury we couldn't afford. For 20 years I've lived by that rule. Michael's arms settled around her shoulders, a protective gesture that surprised them both. Sometimes strength is knowing when to be vulnerable, and with whom. They drifted into sleep like that, two strangers from different worlds finding comfort in shared warmth, shared danger, shared purpose. For a few hours the cabin wasn't a hideout but a sanctuary, the storm not a threat but a shield. Dawn broke with ominous silence. The storm had passed, leaving pristine snow and deadly visibility in its wake. Their protection had evaporated with the clouds exposing them to satellites, drones, and human trackers. Michael was already awake, vigilance never fully surrendering to sleep. He disentangled himself carefully, moving to the window to scan their surroundings. Fresh snow meant fresh tracks they couldn't leave without being followed. But staying meant eventual discovery. The radio crackled to life during their scheduled check-in. Daniel's voice came through tense professional. There's movement on the mountain access roads, county vehicles but not county personnel. They're using the storm cleanup as cover. You've got hours, maybe less. Michael immediately began preparations, gathering essential supplies, checking weapons. We need to move to the contingency location. The tunnel will get us to the garage without leaving tracks. Olivia packed quickly, efficiency born from crisis rather than habit. She paused at the laptop, its dead battery rendering it useless. We need the evidence. It's the only leverage we have. Michael removed the hard drive, securing it in a waterproof pouch. Leverage only works if we're alive to use it. The root cellar access through a trapdoor revealed not just the escape tunnel, but a small arsenal, weapons, ammunition, survival gear, cached years ago by Michael's paranoid but prescient grandfather. Michael selected additional firearms, passing a lighter pistol to Olivia. The tunnel was low, forcing them to crouch as they navigated its damp confines. Roots dangled from the ceiling, occasional wooden supports creaking ominously under the weight of earth above. Olivia fought claustrophobia, focusing on Michael's back ahead of her, moving steadily forward in the beam of their single flashlight. They emerged in a concealed garage built into the hillside, its existence invisible from the outside. Inside sat the old truck, preserved under tarps, ready for their escape. Michael worked quickly to prepare it, while Olivia kept watch through a small viewing port, scanning for movement on the snow-covered access road below. A reflection caught her eye, sunlight on a rifle scope or binoculars. They're here. 3 vehicles approaching from the south road. Michael didn't waste time looking. Into the truck. Now. The engine coughed reluctantly to life, decades-old machinery protesting the sudden awakening. Michael navigated carefully out of the hidden garage, using a service path that followed a stream bed, minimizing their visibility from above. Gunfire erupted behind them. The mercenaries had found the cabin, were searching for occupants. The truck lurched over rough terrain, ancient suspension groaning under the stress. Olivia gripped the dashboard, every bump threatening to crack her teeth. They had perhaps a 5-minute head start before the mercenaries discovered the tunnel. Michael drove with focused intensity, taking logging roads not marked on modern maps, knowledge passed from grandfather to grandson, proving more valuable than GPS. Olivia watched the side mirror, tension climbing her spine with each passing moment. Why did Bennett keep evidence of my mother's murder? Why not destroy it once the job was done? Michael navigated a particularly treacherous turn, ice making the truck's rear end fishtail momentarily. People like Bennett don't just want victory, they want to savor it. The evidence wasn't a liability to him, it was a trophy. Her face hardened with realization. All these years, every time he sat across from me in board meetings, every dinner at my father's house, he was enjoying his secret, watching us build our lives on a foundation he had undermined. The radio crackled with Daniel's voice providing updates on the mercenaries' positions. They found the tunnel. Two teams pursuing, one holding at the cabin. Satellite imagery shows they've called in additional ground support. Michael pressed the accelerator, pushing the old truck beyond reasonable limits. The contingency location was still 20 miles away, a storage facility owned through multiple shell companies, untraceable to either of them. But with pursuit closing in, even Michael's evasive driving might not be enough. A distant thumping grew louder, helicopter rotors beating the air. Olivia's eyes widened. That's a private military contractor aircraft. EC-145 modified for tactical operations. My father used them for executive transport in conflict zones. Michael's jaw tightened. Bennett's not just sending hunters, he's carpet bombing the forest to find us. They abandoned the truck 5 miles from their destination, concealing it under pine branches, before continuing on foot through dense forest. The helicopter circled in widening patterns, thermal imaging, searching for heat signatures among the trees. Olivia struggled to match Michael's pace city life, having never prepared her for wilderness evasion. Her breath came in painful gasps, legs burning with exertion. Michael doubled back periodically, ensuring she kept up, offering silent encouragement with his steady presence. They reached a frozen stream, its surface a treacherous mirror. Michael stepped onto the ice. Follow directly in my footsteps. The ice should hold, but if it cracks, we need to be close enough to help each other. Olivia hesitated, then placed her foot exactly where his had been. They proceeded slowly, each step a calculated risk. The helicopter's sound receded temporarily, searching another sector. Halfway across the ice groaned beneath them, a spiderweb of cracks spreading from Olivia's boot. Michael's hand shot out, grasping her wrist, stabilizing her. Don't move. Distribute your weight. Slide your feet instead of stepping. Terror widened her eyes, primal fear overriding corporate composure. The ice shifted again, water seeping through cracks. One misstep would mean hypothermia within minutes, death shortly after. Michael maintained his grip, voice calm despite the danger. Look at me, not at the ice. We're going to slide toward that fallen tree. Together. On 3. They moved in unison, ice crackling beneath them, water soaking through their boots. With a final lunge, Michael pulled them both onto the snowy bank, the ice shelf collapsing behind them with a decisive crack. They lay on the ground, breathing heavily, adrenaline coursing through their systems. Olivia turned toward him, sudden laughter bubbling up, the absurd, inappropriate mirth of those who've narrowly escaped death. My board would pay millions to see the Ice Queen soaking wet in the snow. Michael's mouth quirked upward, the closest he'd come to a smile in days. I'd pay to see their faces when they found out what you can do with a cast iron pan. The moment passed as quickly as it had come, reality reasserting itself with the distant sound of engines. They pushed onward, wet clothes freezing in the bitter air, each step a battle against cold and exhaustion. The storage facility appeared unremarkable, one of dozens that dotted rural America metal units in neat rows behind chain-link fencing. Michael led them to a specific unit, unlocking it with a key produced from a hidden pocket. Inside sat another vehicle, a nondescript sedan with tinted windows alongside tactical gear, communications equipment, and civilian clothing. Michael immediately activated the heaters in the storage unit, the warmth painful against their frozen extremities. Change quickly. Hypothermia sets in faster than you think. He handed her a set of dry clothes, turning away to provide privacy as they both stripped off freezing layers. Olivia's fingers fumbled with buttons, numbness making simple tasks arduous. The practical clothing, jeans, thermal layers, waterproof boots felt foreign against her skin, accustomed to silk and cashmere. Yet as warmth returned to her limbs, appreciation replaced discomfort. Michael established communications with Daniel, confirming Sophie's continued safety before outlining their situation. The helicopter complicates extraction. They'll have roadblocks on all major routes within the hour. Daniel's response crackled through static. I've got a bureau safe house in Burlington. Can you make it there? Olivia intervened, her strategic mind reasserting itself. We need to draw Bennett out, not just keep running. As long as he controls the narrative, we're fugitives, not witnesses. Michael considered this shift from defensive to offensive posture. She's right. We need to set the trap, not just avoid them. Plans formed rapidly. Daniel's FBI resources, combining with Michael's tactical experience and Olivia's corporate intelligence. The warehouse on the industrial edge of the city became their target, a gray stone property used for document storage, equipped with security systems Michael had helped install during his maintenance work. Most importantly, it had multiple internet connections, backup generators, and cameras covering every angle, perfect for documenting whatever confrontation awaited them. Their journey to the city required constant vigilance, back roads, and multiple vehicle changes, frustrating pursuit. Olivia watched the landscape transform from rural wilderness to suburban developments to urban density, each mile bringing them closer to her former domain and to Bennett. When his face appeared on a passing television through a diner window, Olivia froze mid-step. Bennett stood at a podium, expression grave as he addressed reporters. "We are deeply concerned for Olivia Warren's safety. Her disappearance, combined with concerning financial irregularities we've recently discovered, suggests she may be under duress or influence. Greystone Industries is offering a substantial reward for information leading to her safe return." Michael pulled her away before anyone could connect the woman in practical clothes and a baseball cap with the missing CEO on the screen. In the car, Olivia's hands shook with rage. "He's setting me up, making it look like I embezzled funds and ran." Michael navigated through evening traffic, keeping below speed limits to avoid attention. Classic misdirection. While they're looking for a financial criminal, they're not looking for a murderer. Darkness provided additional cover as they approached the warehouse district. The Greystone facility stood isolated among similar structures, its security lights creating pools of harsh illumination in the surrounding parking areas. Michael surveyed the building through binoculars from a vantage point 2 blocks away. Irregular patrol patterns. Armed security that isn't Greystone standard. Bennett's already fortified it, expecting us. Olivia studied the facility she owned, but had never visited, seeing it through new tactical eyes. The loading bay on the east side. It has a manual override for power outages, maintenance access that bypasses main security. Their strategy developed organically, each contributing expertise from their disparate backgrounds. Michael would enter first, securing the server room and establishing their video uplink. Olivia would follow, using her biometric credentials to access secure areas before they were inevitably locked out of the system. The confrontation with Bennett would be on their terms in a controlled environment, with the world watching via livestream. Evidence documented in real time, too public for even Bennett's connections to suppress. As night deepened, they prepared in a motel room paid for with cash, laying out equipment Daniel had provided through dead drops. Michael cleaned weapons with practiced efficiency, while Olivia recorded a video statement insurance against their potential failure. "If anything happens to us, this evidence goes to every major news outlet simultaneously." Her voice was steady, CEO authority, returning as she detailed Bennett's crimes, her father's poisoning, her mother's murder. 20 years of corporate malfeasance and personal vendetta compressed into 15 devastating minutes. Michael watched her transformation from hunted civilian back to commanding executive with quiet admiration. She finished the recording, pitting his gaze across the room. What if it's not enough? What if his connections are stronger than the truth? Michael secured the final weapon movements precise. "I've operated in countries where truth meant nothing against power, where evidence vanished and witnesses disappeared." His eyes locked with hers. "But I've never seen anyone fight harder for justice than you have these past days. That counts for something." The warehouse operation began at midnight. Michael disabled exterior cameras in a pattern that suggested electrical faults rather than intrusion. They entered through the maintenance access, Olivia's handprint still recognized by the auxiliary system. The interior stretched vast and shadowed shelves of documents reaching toward the high ceiling. Their footsteps echoed despite efforts at silence, the emptiness amplifying every sound. Michael led them toward the server room, instinct and memory guiding him through the labyrinth of corporate archives. Olivia moved differently now, confident but cautious, applying the lessons of their days on the run. Her awareness had expanded beyond boardroom threats to physical vulnerabilities, eyes scanning for cover exits advantages. The server room yielded to her executive override banks of blinking lights, welcoming them with electronic indifference. Michael worked quickly establishing their broadcast capability, ensuring multiple redundant connections that couldn't be easily severed. Olivia accessed the main database, downloading additional evidence of Bennett's financial manipulations. Each discovery revealed new dimensions of his patience and calculation, 20 years of meticulous corruption, building a shadow empire within Greystone's legitimate structure. As Michael finalized their preparations, Olivia studied a company photograph on the wall, her father younger and stronger, standing beside Bennett at a groundbreaking ceremony. Richard's arm was around Bennett's shoulders, his expression one of genuine affection for his protege. He loved him like a son, all while Bennett was planning to destroy everything he built. Michael checked his watch, the countdown to their deliberate exposure nearly complete. Daniel's team would be in position outside ready to intervene when Bennett arrived, but timing was critical. Too soon and Bennett might escape the trap. Too late and they might not survive to spring it. Their moment of controlled revelation never came. Alarms blared, suddenly emergency lights casting red pulses across the server room. Security breach protocols activated steel shutters descending over doors and windows. Bennett's voice emerged from the intercom system, smooth with satisfaction. Olivia, did you really think your access codes wouldn't trigger alerts? That I wouldn't be watching my own warehouse? Michael immediately shifted to defensive positioning, weapons ready, eyes seeking escape routes now sealed by security measures. Olivia's face drained of color, not from fear, but fury. 22 years, Bennett. You've spent 22 years destroying my family. Wait, what did we ever do to you? The intercom crackled with Bennett's laughter. Your father stole everything from me. My research, my innovations, my future. Then he stole Margaret, the one person who saw my potential before Greystone. His voice hardened. I didn't just want his company. I wanted him to watch it burn. Armed mercenaries breached the server room's secondary entrance, forcing Michael and Olivia behind equipment banks for cover. Gunfire erupted, bullets pinging off metal surfaces, glass shattering as the monitors exploded. Michael returned fire with precision, years of training evident in his economy of movement and accuracy. Olivia armed herself with a fallen mercenary's weapon, providing covering fire that, while not expert, demonstrated her rapid adaptation to combat reality. They retreated systematically toward the warehouse floor, using shelving units as cover, communicating through gestures and brief eye contact developed during their days together. The live stream continued from cameras Michael had positioned throughout the facility, broadcasting their desperate defense to growing online audiences. Bennett's mercenaries pursued relentlessly, professional soldiers, executing practice maneuvers against the improvised resistance. Michael took a grazing wound to his arm, but continued fighting, bandaging it roughly while Olivia provided cover. When ammunition ran low, they separated briefly to confuse pursuit, using the warehouse's complex layout to their advantage. Olivia navigated shelving units containing her company's history, financial records, product developments, employee files, the paper legacy of Greystone, now witness to its potential destruction. Michael rejoined her at a predetermined location, blood seeping through his makeshift bandage. We're outnumbered and outgunned. Daniel's team is being blocked by local police, Bennett's connections working against us. Olivia's eyes hardened with determination. Then we bring Bennett to us. Make him face me directly. She moved to an open area, weapon lowered, but visible voice projecting through the cavernous space. Bennett, you wanted my father to watch his company burn. Well, I'm watching. Come tell me to my face why my mother had to die for your revenge. Silence followed her challenge, broken only by distant footsteps as mercenaries regrouped. Then Bennett's voice, closer now, speaking through the facility's internal communications system. Your mother was collateral damage, Olivia. She chose Richard over me years before. Her loyalty sealed her fate. Michael used the distraction to position himself advantageously, moving silently through shadows while Bennett continued his monologue. Olivia maintained the engagement, her corporate experience in holding attention during presentations now serving a deadlier purpose. So this elaborate revenge, poisoning my father, infiltrating the company, planning my murder. All because you couldn't handle rejection. Her voice dripped with the same contempt she'd used to eviscerate unprepared executives. How disappointingly predictable. The taunt achieved its purpose. Bennett emerged onto the warehouse floor, flanked by two mercenaries, his pristine suit incongruous among tactical gear. His pale features twisted with rage, control finally slipping after decades of calculated patience. You're just like him, arrogant, entitled, blind to the contributions of those you consider beneath you. Bennett advanced toward her hand holding a chrome pistol that looked more decorative than functional. I built Greystone's modern infrastructure while your father took the credit. I developed the Asian market expansion he claimed as his vision. I was the architect of this company's success. Olivia maintained steady eye contact, keeping Bennett's attention fixed on her while Michael maneuvered unseen behind shelving units. Your delusion would be sad if it wasn't so destructive. My father gave you opportunities beyond your qualifications. He trusted you. He considered you family. Bennett's laugh echoed hollowly. Family. He saw me as a useful tool, nothing more. When I finally control Greystone after you and Richard are both gone, I'll rebuild it as it should have been. My vision, my legacy. The live stream captured every word, every gesture, Bennett's confession transmitted globally in real time. Viewer counts climbed exponentially as social media amplified the broadcast, the corporate drama and violence, creating an irresistible spectacle. Olivia took a deliberate step forward, weapons still lowered. You've already lost Bennett. This conversation is streaming to hundreds of thousands of viewers. Your confession is on record. Greystone's stock is probably plummeting as we speak. Doubt flickered across Bennett's features. His gaze darted to a mercenary's communication device, confirming her claim as the man nodded reluctantly. Bennett's composure cracked further calculation, giving way to desperate rage. Then none of us leaves alive. He raised his weapon, aiming directly at Olivia's heart. If I can't have Greystone, no one will. The moment crystallized in terrible clarity, Bennett's finger tightening on the trigger, Olivia's defiant stance, Michael emerging from cover with weapon raised. 3 lives intersecting in a warehouse that held the paper history of the company they'd fought over, about to write its bloodiest chapter. The gunshot echoed through the cavernous space, but it wasn't Bennett who fired. From the warehouse entrance, a haggard figure supported by an FBI agent stood with smoking pistols still raised. Richard Warren, looking decades older than his years, face gaunt from poison and betrayal, had shot his protege in the shoulder. Bennett crumpled more from shock than the wound itself. Richard, you're supposed to be incapacitated. The experimental treatments, the dosage was calculated. Richard's voice emerged weak but determined. I stopped taking your vitamin shots months ago, Bennett. Started having them analyzed instead. His frail body trembled with the effort of standing. I just needed evidence, needed to understand why. Why Margaret? She loved you like a brother. Bennett's mercenaries, sensing the shifting tide, began melting away rather than engaging federal agents now flooding the warehouse. Bennett himself stared at Richard with naked hatred, decades of carefully constructed facade finally shattered. She chose you. Everything I wanted you took. The company should have been mine. Margaret should have been mine. Even Olivia. I should have been her mentor, her guide into the business world. FBI agents secured Bennett, reciting rights he barely seemed to hear as he continued his tirade. Richard collapsed into a wheelchair provided by medical personnel, the exertion of his dramatic entrance depleting his limited strength. Olivia rushed to her father, professional detachment finally breaking completely as she knelt beside him. Daniel's team had brought him from the hospital against medical advice, a desperate gamble that had saved her life. Michael secured the perimeter with Daniel military precision, returning in the aftermath of chaos. The live stream continued, documenting everything: the arrest, the family reunion, the evidence collection. Bennett's carefully constructed empire dismantling in real time before a global audience. In a quiet moment between debriefings, Olivia found Michael having his arm properly bandaged by a paramedic. Their eyes met across the warehouse floor, now crawling with federal agents and evidence technicians. They'd entered as fugitives and would leave as witnesses, their status transformed by truth finally exposed. Richard was returned to medical care, the arsenic poisoning having done irreversible damage despite discontinued exposure. Bennett faced multiple charges: attempted murder, conspiracy, embezzlement, corporate fraud, his empire of lies crumbling beneath the weight of evidence he'd arrogantly preserved. Olivia stood outside the warehouse in pre-dawn light, watching federal agents lead Bennett to a transport vehicle. The man who'd shaped her life through tragedy now appeared diminished, ordinary in handcuffs, his power evaporated like morning mist. Michael joined her, Sophie's voice still bright in his ears from a brief call confirming her safety. The adrenaline crash left them both hollow-eyed and exhausted, running on reserves depleted by days of constant vigilance. What happens now? Michael's question encompassed more than immediate logistics. Olivia watched the transport vehicle disappear around a corner, Bennett's shadow finally lifting from her life. I rebuild. Not Greystone that's beyond salvation, but myself. She turned to face him fully. I've spent 22 years becoming someone I thought my father needed, someone formed by grief I didn't understand. Now I find out who Olivia Warren actually is. The morning sun crested the horizon, painting the industrial landscape in gold. They stood side by side, a maintenance worker and a CEO, united by survival, by purpose, by something neither was ready to name. Different paths had led them to this moment, and different futures awaited, but for now they shared the quiet victory of truth revealed and lives reclaimed. Across the city, news channels interrupted regular programming with breaking coverage. Greystone Industries stock suspended trading amid allegations of massive fraud. Bennett Hayes in federal custody, facing multiple charges including conspiracy to commit murder. Richard Warren hospitalized in critical condition. And Olivia Warren, the ice queen of corporate America, missing. From the dramatic warehouse confrontation, her whereabouts unknown as authorities continued their investigation. The world was watching, but Olivia and Michael had already disappeared, moving toward the safe house where Sophie waited, toward a future neither had imagined possible days before. The chess pieces of power, wealth, and vengeance continued their dance without them, the game changing irrevocably while they chose for the moment not to play. The safe house sat on a quiet residential street in Burlington, its modest facade blending perfectly with neighboring homes. Sophie's delighted squeal pierced the somber atmosphere. As Michael stepped through the door, she launched herself into his arms, small fingers clinging to his neck with fierce determination, as if afraid he might disappear again if she loosened her grip. Daniel Carter watched from the kitchen doorway, relief evident in his posture. The tension that had gripped his features for days eased at the sight of Michael and Olivia alive, if somewhat battered. A tablet on the counter played news coverage, quietly financial analysts speculating on Greystone's collapse, interviews with shocked industry experts, footage of FBI vehicles surrounding the Warren estate. Sophie pulled back from her father's embrace, eyes widening as she spotted Olivia. "You came back too." Her innocent delight remained untouched by the violence and betrayal of the adult world. "Are you staying with us now? I told Uncle Danny you would." I showed him my drawing of our family. Michael and Olivia exchanged glances, reality crashing back after the adrenaline of survival. Neither had considered what came after Bennett, after Greystone, after the momentary alliance forged by danger. The child's simple question laid bare the complexity of their undefined relationship. Daniel intervened, steering Sophie toward the kitchen with promises of hot chocolate. Michael sank onto the sofa, exhaustion claiming its due now that his daughter was safe. The wound on his arm throbbed beneath fresh bandages applied by paramedics before they'd slipped away from the warehouse. Olivia remained standing, years of corporate posture reasserting itself, despite dirt-smudged jeans and the borrowed jacket hanging loose on her frame. She studied the news coverage, her professional world disintegrating in real time. Greystone shares had been suspended after plummeting 60% in pre-market trading. Industry analysts questioned whether the company could survive the revelations intact. Major clients were already announcing plans to sever ties. Michael watched her face as she absorbed the destruction of her life's work, searching for signs of regret. Instead, he found something unexpected: relief softening the edges of her expression. "I should feel devastated." She spoke without turning from the screen. 22 years building something, and it's gone in 22 minutes of live-streamed confession. He shifted on the sofa, making room beside him in silent invitation. Nothing built on a rotten foundation stands forever. She accepted the offered space, her posture collapsing as she sat, the CEO armor cracking completely. "What am I supposed to do now? Who am I without Greystone?" She stared at her hands, calluses and broken nails, replacing the perfect manicure of her former life. "I don't even know how to exist without quarterly targets and shareholder expectations." Michael's experience with loss of military career, of marriage, of certainty, gave weight to his response. "You rebuild, not what was, but what could be. Something authentic this time." The following days brought a cascade of revelations and consequences. Federal investigations expanded beyond Bennett to include board members and executives complicit in the fraud. Richard Warren's condition stabilized but remained critical, the years of arsenic poisoning having caused permanent neurological damage. Greystone Industries began the painful process of dissolution, its components evaluated for salvage, like organs harvested from a corpse. Olivia watched from a distance, her media silence feeding speculation about her involvement or victimhood. Reporters camped outside her penthouse, unaware she observed their stakeout from Daniel's unmarked car across the street. The life she'd built had become a museum exhibit, visible but untouchable. "My entire wardrobe is in there." She attempted humor to mask the strange detachment. 12 years of designer acquisitions, and I can't even grab a change of clothes. Daniel kept the engine running, eyes scanning for signs of surveillance beyond the obvious press presence. "The Bureau's cleared you of criminal involvement, but that doesn't mean Bennett's private network isn't still operational." His resources extended beyond Greystone. Olivia's visit to Richard in the hospital occurred under federal protection. Corridors were cleared of other visitors, medical staff vetted and limited. Her father lay diminished among monitoring equipment, skin yellowed from organ damage, eyes hollow and a face aged decades and months. She approached the bed cautiously, their estrangement compounded by shocking revelations. The patriarch who'd shaped her into his corporate image now appeared vulnerable, mortal, a frail old man betrayed by his closest confidant. Richard's fingers trembled as he reached for her hand. "I should have seen it. Should have protected you both." His voice emerged as a whisper, damaged vocal cords, another casualty of the poisoning. "Margaret would never forgive me." Olivia felt the strange disconnect between the father she'd known, demanding, coldly ambitious, and this broken man seeking absolution. The distance she'd maintained as protective armor suddenly seemed a luxury she could no longer afford. All those years trying to impress you, to be worthy of Greystone. "I thought that's what love looked like in our family achievement excellence control." Richard's eyes filled with tears, emotion he'd suppressed for decades finally surfacing. "After your mother died, I didn't know how to be both father and mother. Business made sense when nothing else did. I thought making you strong would keep you safe." He coughed, the effort painful. "I was wrong about so many things, Olivia. So many things." The monitors beeped steadily, measuring the damaged heartbeat of a man confronting his failures. A lifetime of missed opportunities and emotions buried beneath balance sheets, compressed into a hospital room, smelling of antiseptic and regret. When Olivia returned to the safe house, the weight of her father's confession pressed against her chest like physical pain. Sophie sat at the kitchen table, drawing with focused intensity, tongue caught between her teeth in concentration. Michael prepared dinner, domestic skills honed by years of single parenthood, transforming simple ingredients into a meal. The scene struck Olivia with unexpected longing, not for the luxury and power she'd lost, but for the ordinary comfort she'd never known. Her childhood homes had featured housekeepers and private chefs, homework supervised by tutors rather than parents' achievements, celebrated with formal dinners rather than exuberant hugs. Sophie looked up, crayon poised mid-stroke. "Did you see your daddy? Is he still sick?" The innocent question pierced Olivia's practiced composure. She nodded, unable to find appropriate words for the complicated truth. Sophie considered this with childhood wisdom before returning to her drawing. "My mommy left and never came back. But that's okay because I have the best daddy." Her matter-of-fact acceptance of abandonment revealed depths beneath her cheerful exterior. "Maybe your daddy will get better." Michael watched the exchange, silently recognizing the impact of his daughter's simple compassion on Olivia's carefully constructed defenses. He'd witnessed this before Sophie's ability to reach past adult complications to emotional truths, offering connection without agenda or expectation. That night, after Sophie had been tucked into bed with stories and reassurances, Michael and Olivia sat on the porch of the safe house. Stars emerged above them, the vastness of possibility, replacing the confines of survival that had defined their relationship. "I barely recognize myself anymore." Olivia's admission carried the weight of both loss and discovery. 3 weeks ago, I was preparing for the Singapore expansion announcement. My biggest concern was whether the CFO's presentation would satisfy the analysts. She wrapped her arms around herself against the evening chill. "Now I'm a homeless former CEO with frozen assets and no change of clothes." Michael considered her profile in the dim porch light, seeing beneath the discomfort to the transformation occurring. 3 weeks ago, I was unclogging executive bathroom toilets and planning Sophie's school science project. He leaned back in the weather chair. Life can change direction in an instant, sometimes for the worse, sometimes for something different that becomes better. The federal protection extended to Sophie necessitated her continued absence from school, raising questions about longer-term arrangements. Daniel arranged for her schoolwork to be delivered, but the improvised situation couldn't continue indefinitely. The safe house provided temporary shelter, not permanent residence. Michael contacted his landlord about returning to their apartment above the bodega, only to discover Bennett's mercenaries had ransacked it during their search. The modest possessions accumulated over years of careful budgeting lay destroyed furniture, slashed electronics, smashed Sophie's artwork torn from the refrigerator door. Daniel delivered the news along with photographs documenting the damage for insurance claims. The hardest blow came when Michael scrolled to images of Sophie's room. Her bed overturned, stuffed animals disemboweled, the model solar system they'd built together for science class crushed beneath boot prints. Olivia found him staring at the photos, rage and grief battling across his features. Without asking permission, she sat beside him, a shoulder touching his in silent support. The intimacy they developed during their days on the run had created its own language communication beyond words. He's taken enough from both of us. Her quiet determination shifted something in the atmosphere between them. We're not letting him take anything else. A week after the warehouse confrontation, Richard Warren's condition deteriorated suddenly. Organ systems damaged by years of poison began failing despite medical intervention. Olivia reached her father's bedside as monitors screamed urgent warnings, medical staff working with controlled urgency to stabilize vital signs. Richard's consciousness surfaced briefly through medication, recognition, flickering in rheumy eyes as he found his daughter amid the chaos. His papery fingers clutched hers with surprising strength. Listen, his voice barely audible beneath the oxygen mask. Margaret's garden, the south corner, dig beneath the stone bench. Confusion furrowed Olivia's brow as she leaned closer. The Warren Estates gardens had been her mother's passion, maintained exactly as she designed them, even decades after her death. Dad, what are you? Find it. Before they do, a trust-only read. The effort exhausted his limited strength, consciousness slipping away as monitors stabilized into the rhythm of medically induced coma. When Olivia returned to the safe house, Michael recognized immediately that something had changed. She paced the living room, energy crackling around her, despite exhaustion shadowing her eyes. My father regained consciousness briefly. He said something about my mother's garden, about digging beneath a stone bench, that we should find whatever's there before they do. Michael's intelligence training activated mind cataloging possibilities. Could be delirium from medication. Could be something Bennett doesn't know about, evidence or assets hidden decades ago. The Warren estate sat empty now, its staff dismissed during the investigation, security limited to occasional police patrols. Accessing it meant risk, but potential answers justified the exposure. Daniel reluctantly agreed to facilitate their visit to Bannon, arranging for a temporary suspension of surveillance to allow their exploration. They arrived at dusk, the mansion's silhouette imposing against the darkening sky. Olivia hesitated at the front gates, memories assaulting her childhood birthday parties, holiday gatherings before her mother's death, the gradual transformation of home into corporate headquarters as Richard's grief manifested through work. The garden stretched behind the main house, Margaret Warren's vision maintained with obsessive precision through the decades. Formal beds of perennials stood dormant in early spring structure, evident even without summer blooms. Olivia led them unerringly toward the south corner, where a stone bench overlooked a small reflection pool. The bench itself appeared unremarkable, weathered by seasons but solid. Michael examined it carefully before attempting to shift its position, discovering hidden rollers beneath that allowed it to move despite its substantial weight. Beneath lay not dirt, but a sealed metal panel, its surface protected from elements by the bench above. Fingerprint and retinal scanners embedded in the panel activated as Olivia knelt beside it. Technology decades old but still functional recognized her biometric signatures. Warren DNA granted access to secrets buried by previous generations. The compartment revealed beneath contained a waterproof case, its contents preserved against time and elements. Inside, they found documents, original incorporation papers for Greystone Industries, showing Richard Warren and Bennett Hayes as co-founders rather than employer and employee. Research journals filled with Margaret's handwriting detailed innovations Bennett had claimed as his own. Most damning, a handwritten confession from Richard acknowledging how he'd systematically marginalized Bennett's contributions after Margaret's death, erasing his former partner from company history out of misplaced jealousy and suspicion. Olivia's hands trembled as she processed this revision of family history. Bennett wasn't lying about everything. My father did steal his research, his innovations. He really did erase him. Michael examined the dates on the documents, constructing timeline against known events. Your father suspected Bennett's involvement in your mother's death, but couldn't prove it. This was his insurance policy, mutually assured destruction if Bennett ever moved against him directly. The complicated truth settled between them, neither man entirely victim nor villain, both corrupted by ambition and rivalry. Margaret Warren emerged as the connection between them, her death the catalyst for decades of festering resentment and calculated vengeance. Among the documents lay a sealed envelope addressed to Olivia in her mother's handwriting, dated days before her death. The paper inside had yellowed slightly at the edges, but remained intact, preserved in its oxygen-free environment for 22 years. My dearest Olivia, the letter began. If you're reading this, something has happened to me, and your father has finally shared the truth I've tried to protect you from. Bennett's obsession has become dangerous. I've discovered his tampering with research results, his attempts to claim credit for work he didn't do. When confronted, he threatened rather than apologized. The letter continued, revealing Margaret's plans to expose Bennett's scientific fraud, her scheduled meeting with the board that never occurred because of her accident. The final paragraph shifted from explanation to maternal wisdom preserved across decades. Remember who you are beyond any company or fortune. Your worth isn't measured in stock prices or market share. I've watched you growing into someone extraordinary, compassionate, despite your father's focus on competition, intuitive beyond your years. Don't let Greystone define you as it has defined your father. Build something that matters, something that heals rather than consumes, and know that whatever happens, my love for you transcends time and circumstance. Tears tracked silently down Olivia's face as she absorbed her mother's final communication, guidance, and love preserved like a time capsule arriving precisely when needed. The letter transformed Margaret from memorial photograph to present advisor, her wisdom bridging the years of absence. Michael maintained respectful distance during this intimate reunion, securing the remaining documents while Olivia processed her mother's words. The complexity of the situation expanded with each revelation, Bennett's legitimate grievances twisted into monstrous revenge, Richard's protective instincts corrupted by grief and guilt, Margaret's legacy distorted by both men's incomplete narratives. Richard never regained consciousness. 3 days after their garden discovery, his damaged systems surrendered to accumulated poison. Olivia received the news with complex grief, mourning not just her father's death, but the relationship they might have rebuilt had time allowed. The emotional distance she'd maintained as professional strategy now became permanent opportunities for reconciliation lost forever. The funeral occurred under heavy security attendance, limited to prevent disruption. Olivia stood beside the grave as her father was laid to rest beside Margaret. Their complicated love story concluded beneath matching headstones. Former business associates offered condolences that felt hollow against her new understanding of Greystone's corrupted foundation. Michael attended with Sophie, their presence providing anchor amid corporate platitudes and media speculation. Sophie's hand slipped into Olivia's during the service, small fingers offering comfort with innocent directness adults couldn't match. When she placed a hand-picked wildflower on Richard's casket, the simple gesture pierced the ceremony's formal atmosphere, introducing genuine emotion among rehearsed responses. The reading of Richard's will revealed final surprises. While Greystone assets remained frozen pending investigation outcomes, Richard's personal fortunes, substantial, despite corporate entanglements, transferred to Olivia with specific instructions. A significant portion was designated for establishing a foundation in Margaret's name, focused on supporting female scientists and entrepreneurs denied recognition for their innovations. Most unexpected, Richard had maintained a separate property portfolio, unknown to Bennett or business associates, including a modest lakeside cabin in Vermont's Northeast Kingdom, purchased the year of Margaret's death but never visited. The deed transferred to Olivia with a handwritten note, "For new beginnings when Greystone is behind you." These final gestures suggested a father who'd known his daughter better than she'd realized, who'd recognized her growing discomfort with Greystone's culture, even as he'd pushed her deeper into it. Behind the demanding patriarch had existed another man, one who'd created escape routes from the life he'd insisted she pursue. I think he always knew I wasn't meant for that world. Olivia traced the cabin deed with her fingertip voice soft with realization. Or at least he hoped I wasn't. Michael considered this glimpse into Richard's complexity. Maybe pushing you toward Greystone was his way of making sure you'd be strong enough to leave it one day. Sometimes parents prepare their children for worlds they themselves couldn't escape. The exchange revealed the gradual evolution of their relationship from survival alliance to something more nuanced, built on mutual understanding rather than circumstantial proximity. They'd begun to see each other as people, not just the maintenance worker and the CEO thrust together by crisis. When federal authorities finally cleared Michael's apartment building for reoccupation, the return to his former residence presented complicated emotions. The physical damage had been repaired through insurance and FBI victim assistance, but the violation remained Bennett's intrusion into their sanctuary, leaving invisible marks alongside the replaced furniture and repainted walls. Sophie approached the transition with characteristic adaptability, excited to sleep in her own bed, despite its newness, eager to introduce her school friends to the rebuilt space. Michael observed her resilience with paternal pride tinged by awareness of emotional complexities she might process later when safety felt more certain. Olivia accompanied them for the homecoming, her presence during the transition unquestioned by any of them. The dynamics established during crisis had evolved into something undefined but essential, her role in their reconstructed lives no longer temporary assistance but integral component. Sophie immediately reclaimed her territory, evaluating replacement toys against remembered originals, approving structural improvements to her bedroom shelving. Her adaptation provided template for the adults watching her incorporate change into experience, rather than resisting its inevitability. Later, with Sophie asleep amid rebuilt surroundings, Michael and Olivia sat on the apartment's small balcony, overlooking the neighborhood. The bodega below had closed for the night, its neon signs darked the street quieter than the busy safe house neighborhood had been. So, Michael's question contained multitudes acknowledging transition without demanding immediate definition. Olivia watched the occasional car pass below the ordinary rhythm of city life, continuing regardless of personal upheaval. I closed on my father's cabin yesterday. It needs work. It's been empty for 20 years, but the structure is sound. She hesitated in unfamiliar territory extending before her. I was thinking Sophie might like camping this summer. Real camping, not the running for our lives variety. The invitation hung between them, its significance extending beyond seasonal recreation to potential futures neither had anticipated months earlier. Michael considered it with appropriate weight, understanding, offered paths, and chosen directions. She's always wanted to learn fishing. His acceptance carried equal significance, acknowledging possibilities beyond immediate logistics. Though I should warn you, she gets impatient if they don't bite within 5 minutes. A comfortable silence fell between them, free of the tension that had characterized their early interactions. The understanding that had developed during their flight from Bennett now evolved into something more deliberate, chosen rather than forced by circumstance. The warehouse trials began in early summer, Bennett and his co-conspirators facing justice in federal court. Olivia's testimony provided cornerstone evidence, her corporate expertise translating complex financial schemes into understandable narratives for judge and jury. Michael testified about the garage shooting, the evidence recovery, the pursuit that followed. Bennett maintained defiance throughout proceedings, his attorneys constructing defense and around Richard's documented appropriation of his research. The strategy failed against overwhelming evidence of Bennett's subsequent crimes: murder, attempted murder, poisoning, embezzlement, transcending legitimate grievance into calculated destruction. The jury deliberated 3 days before returning guilty verdicts across all major counts. Bennett received multiple life sentences without possibility of parole. His remaining assets forfeited his name, joining corporate villains in public consciousness rather than achieving the recognition he'd craved. Olivia attended the sentencing with Michael beside her, closure rather than celebration motivating their presence. Bennett's gaze locked with hers as officers led him away, decades of obsession distilled into final contact. She met his eyes without flinching, neither victory nor defeat in her expression, simply completion, the conclusion of a chapter rather than an entire story. Outside the courthouse, reporters clustered with shouted questions about Greystone's future, Olivia's plans, the foundation established in Margaret's name. She answered selectively, maintaining privacy around personal directions while addressing corporate responsibilities. This trial has revealed corruption at levels that cannot be separated from Greystone's core operations. Her voice carried the authority she'd cultivated for 2 decades, but with a new authenticity replacing the Ice Queen's practiced precision. The Margaret Warren Foundation will work to ensure that women in science and technology receive proper recognition and protection for their innovations. My mother's legacy deserves better than what happened to her work. A reporter pushed forward, microphone extended. And what about you personally, Ms. Warren? You've lost your position, your company. What comes next? Olivia glanced toward Michael, who waited beyond the media scrum with Sophie. A slight smile softened her features. I'm exploring new definitions of success. She joined them without looking back. Priorities reordered beyond career considerations that once consumed her existence. Sophie skipped between them as they walked away from the courthouse, her hand occasionally reaching up to grasp Olivia's, the gesture natural after months of growing connection. The Vermont cabin revealed itself gradually beneath decades of neglect, Margaret's vision emerging through careful restoration. The structure itself remained sound, Richard's resources ensuring quality construction despite absence of personal attention. Renovation became weekend project for all three of them, Sophie taking particular pride in selecting colors for her designated bedroom. You want purple every wall? Michael questioned as they examined paint swatches. Sophie nodded with absolute certainty. Purple is a royal color, and this is my castle room. Olivia suppressed a smile, remembering her own childhood bedroom, tastefully decorated in neutral tones, selected by an interior designer without her input or consideration. Maybe we could do 3 walls in a lighter purple and 1 accent wall in the darker shade you like. Sophie considered this compromise with serious deliberation before nodding agreement. The adults exchanged glances. Above his head shared amusement at her earnest negotiations, revealing the gradual formation of family patterns decisions made collectively preferences, honored within reasonable boundaries. Olivia discovered unexpected satisfaction in physical labor, corporate precision finding new application in measuring twice before cutting once. Michael's maintenance skills translated seamlessly to renovation work, his patience with Sophie's enthusiastic but inexpert assistance modeling fatherhood that balanced protection with empowerment. The lake stretched beyond the cabin's wide windows, its surface reflecting changing skies and surrounding pines. Sophie learned fishing from Michael's patient instruction, her concentration while waiting for bites rivaling focus previously reserved for artistic creation. Olivia watched their interactions from the cabin porch, recognizing family patterns forming organically rather than through enforced expectation. Between renovation weekends, Michael continued school maintenance work, while Olivia established the Margaret Warren Foundation headquarters in modest offices, distant from Greystone's former corporate tower. The foundation's mission refined through consultation with female scientists and entrepreneurs, addressing systemic barriers identified through collective experience rather than imposed solution. What made you choose this space? Michael asked during his first visit to the foundation offices, a converted warehouse with exposed brick and abundant natural light. Nothing like Greystone's glass and steel monumentalism. Olivia gestured toward the collaborative workspaces, the absence of corner offices or executive suites. Hierarchy was necessary at Greystone because power was the product. Here, innovation and cooperation are the products. The structure should reflect that. Her transformation from corporate strategist to foundation director wasn't without challenges. Years of conditioning didn't dissolve overnight. She still caught herself thinking in quarters, rather than long-term impacts, still occasionally defaulted to cost-benefit analysis over human considerations. But each day brought incremental change, the Ice Queen's precision redirected toward protection rather than profit. The Foundation's initial grants produced tangible results, patents secured in creators' names, research published with proper attribution, innovations developed without corporate appropriation. Margaret's legacy extended beyond financial support to structural protection, systemic change rather than individual assistance. Federal asset seizures from Bennett's network provided unexpected funding sources. Justice Department directing recovered funds or towards supporting those harmed by corporate fraud. The poetic justice wasn't lost on Olivia Bennett's war chest, now financing the very protections he'd circumvented. His tools of destruction repurposed for creation. Sophie's drawing remained prominently displayed in both apartment and cabin. 3 figures holding hands beneath crayon sky family constructed through choice rather than circumstance. Additional artwork joined the original, her artistic development, chronicling their evolving connection through child's perspective, uncomplicated by adult hesitation. Vermont's autumn painted surrounding forests in spectacular color transformation, making the cabin almost unrecognizable from its abandoned state months earlier. They gathered around the fire pit Michael had constructed, flames warming the cooling evening air as stars emerged above the lake. Sophie roasted marshmallows with intense concentration, determined to achieve perfect golden brown rather than characteristic charring from previous attempts. Her growth over months measured not just in inches, but in confidence, in security restored after disruption and trust rebuilt through consistent presence. When she'd achieved marshmallow perfection and consumed the evidence, Sophie's yawns signaled bedtime despite token protests. Michael accompanied her inside for the bedtime routine established through years of single parenthood, leaving Olivia alone beside the fire contemplation, replacing constant vigilance. He returned to find her watching flames consume cedar logs, light dancing across features softened from corporate precision to something more contemplative. The Ice Queen had melted, completely replaced by a woman both stronger and more vulnerable than her former persona had allowed. I received another publisher offer today. Olivia poked the fire with a stick, sending sparks spiraling upward. 7 figures for the inside story of Bennett Hayes and the Fall of Greystone. Michael settled beside her shoulder, touching hers in the companionable closeness developed through shared danger and subsequent rebuilding. You're not interested. Her smile acknowledged his understanding without requiring explanation. I don't want to build my future looking backward. Bennett's already taken enough time and energy. The foundation work feels healing, like I'm finally doing something my mother would recognize as success. The comfortable silence between them expanded, filled with cricket song and distant loon calls across the lake. Progress from crisis to stability to potential future had occurred through incremental steps rather than dramatic declaration, relationship built on substantive foundation rather than circumstantial proximity. When Michael finally spoke, his words carried weight beyond immediate conversation. I've been offered the facilities director position at Sophie's school. Better hours, benefits, holidays, and summers aligned with her schedule. Olivia studied his profile in the firelight. Understanding the life restructuring, this represented career advancement, balancing professional growth with parental responsibility. That's wonderful. You deserve recognition for your skills beyond maintenance work. His hand found hers in the gathering darkness, the contact deliberate rather than incidental. I've been thinking about a more permanent arrangement here. At the cabin, he gestured toward the structure they'd rebuilt together. If that's something you might consider. The question's significance hung between them. Potential futures contained within carefully chosen words. Olivia's corporate training had prepared her for high-stakes negotiations across boardroom tables, but nothing had equipped her for this more personal proposal, with implications extending beyond business quarters. When I was the Ice Queen, my worth came from what I produced, what I controlled. She interlaced her fingers with his, the simple gesture carrying commitment beyond verbal declaration. Now I'm learning to value what I create, what I nurture. She smiled, the expression reaching her eyes in ways her corporate persona never allowed. I think Margaret would approve of this investment strategy. Morning found them on the dock, coffee steam rising in the crisp air, as Sophie attempted to capture the lake's mirror surface in watercolor's tongue caught between her teeth in familiar concentration. Ducks paddled nearby, occasionally disrupting perfect reflection with rippling wakes. Michael watched his daughter's focused creativity, the morning light illuminating changes subtle and profound. The hypervigilance instilled through military service and reinforced during their flight from Bennett had finally eased, replaced by awareness without constant tension. Safety established through justice rather than continuing evasion. Olivia joined them with breakfast prepared, according to Sophie's exacting specifications. Pancakes with blueberries arranged in smiley face patterns, a skill developed through weekend practice sessions. Her transition from executive who delegated meals to person who created them symbolized broader transformation, from directing others to direct participation, from authority to collaboration. Sophie evaluated the pancake faces with mock seriousness before declaring them acceptable, her approval generating disproportionate satisfaction compared to corporate achievements that had once defined success. She returned to her painting while the adults enjoyed quiet conversation, ordinary pleasures replacing extraordinary circumstances. The lake stretched before them, surface catching morning light in diamond patterns. Beyond the water, forest climbed surrounding mountains in autumn splendor, natural calendar marking seasonal transition. The cabin behind them stood restored, its structure, sound, its purpose redefined from memorial to living space. When Sophie completed her artistic endeavor, she presented it with ceremony befitting significant achievement. The watercolor captured not just the landscape, but the dock itself, three figures seated together watching the sunrise. Our family at our home. Her matter-of-fact declaration contained certainty adults hesitated to voice directly. Michael and Olivia accepted both artwork and declaration with appropriate solemnity, understanding the child's perspective, clarified truth they had approached more cautiously. The family formed not through traditional paths but through crisis choice and gradual building of connection beyond circumstance. Sophie's kite caught an updraft butterfly wing soaring higher against the cloudless blue. Her joyful laughter carried across the meadow as she ran, with the string instinctively adjusting tension to maintain altitude. Olivia watched from their picnic blanket, still occasionally surprised by the ordinary happiness that had replaced corporate ambition in her life's ledger. The foundation work continued expanding, purpose refined through experience rather than theoretical planning. Building something healing rather than consuming had shifted from aspiration to ongoing reality. Michael joined her after helping Sophie achieve stable flight pattern satisfaction, evident in his relaxed posture. The hypervigilance necessary during their hunted period had gradually subsided, replaced by appropriate awareness without constant tension. His attention remained protective, but not restrictive, safety established through conscious choice rather than response to threat. I spent my entire adult life watching for danger. His voice carried the peaceful reflection of a warrior who'd found his way home. I became so good at spotting threats that I forgot how to recognize opportunity when it appeared. Olivia leaned against his shoulder, the contact comfortable rather than calculated. From Ice Queen to CEO to fugitive to foundation director, the transformation might appear radical from external perspective, yet felt organic from within. Each stage had revealed aspects of herself, previously unexplored potential, developed through circumstance rather than strategic planning. Sophie called for them to witness a particularly successful kite maneuver, her pride infectious despite the modest achievement. They applauded appropriately parental encouragement, reinforcing confidence beyond specific skill development. The kite soared higher butterfly wings, catching updrafts that carried it toward cloudless blue. When she ran back to them, breathless with excitement, they made space on the blanket for her triumphant return. The family they'd become had formed not through traditional paths, but through crisis choice and gradual building of connection beyond circumstance or expectation. Overhead, the kite continued dancing against summer sky, a splash of color and possibility against limitless horizon, carrying their quiet joy higher and higher into the promise of continuing seasons.